Welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Podcast, hosted by CRM technology and sales process expert Christopher Smith, talking with sales leaders that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Listen to find out how the best of the best achieve success with their team and CRM technology. And remember, unless you are the lead dog, the view never changes.
Welcome to Sales Lead Dog. Today on this episode, I have Jason Grimes of Stretto joining me. Jason is the Vice President Software Sales for Stretto. Jason, welcome to Sales Lead Dog.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
It's great having you here, Jason. Jason, tell me a little bit about Stretto.
Sure. So Stretto is a company that works all across bankruptcy and fiduciary concerns across the entire bankruptcy ecosystem, from trustees to corporate restructuring to selling software, which is the division that I lead, to consumer bankruptcy attorneys to help individual debtors.
I imagine that is, people think bankruptcy, how big is that or whatever, but I would imagine, especially when you get into corporate bankruptcy, that's pretty big, pretty complex cases. Is that where Stretto comes into play to help deal with that complexity?
For sure, for sure. We have a corporate restructuring side that helps out with everything related to claims and noticing and kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff that the big major corporate law firms do along with the creditors. For example, the Neiman Marcus bankruptcy from a decade or so ago, all the things related to getting noticing out to all the different creditors, dealing all of the due diligence work behind the scenes. Those are the kind of things that we do on that side of the business. And frankly, Stretto was founded about 6 years ago, coming together of 3 different separate entities that worked in the bankruptcy world, all came together. New corporate umbrella called Stretto was created, but they kind of came out of pre-existing entities. In my world, and again, I live mostly in what we call the debtor attorney space. In other words, attorneys who work with debtors, or the consumer bankruptcy space is another way to put it. The brand that's really well known amongst that world is a software platform called Best Case. And so, when you go to see us at conferences, it doesn't just say Stretto, it says Best Case by Stretto, because that's the brand that's best known.
Yeah.
And I've got, I'm sure you'll ask questions about it, but I've got 20 years history of working with software in the legal space. And I'm also a lawyer by training. So I've kept my license up and all that stuff. That's
wild. You're the first licensed attorney I've had on the show. So
well, don't ask me for any legal advice, but we're all good.
But you're licensed and able to give it if needed, right?
Well, in Ohio, where it's recently
yeah.
my state practice. I know you're in Colorado, so I'd have to kind of say, I'd have to do all the caveats and all the disclaimers around. This is just shade tree advice. We're just talking by the water cooler.
Yeah.
That kind of.
So you went to law school. I'm sure when you went to law school, you weren't thinking, hey, the hell with the law, I'm going to go into sales. How'd you get into sales?
It's interesting. I kind of did everything backwards. And so if anybody takes anything away from this at the kind of the personal story level, I think it's important to know that there's not one right way to do things. There's not a trajectory that makes sense for everybody. My trajectory to where I am today, mid-career, if you want to call it that, is a little backwards for a lot of, people even in my industry. I was recruited to work for LexisNexis, which a lot of people will have heard of, while I was just kind of petering through life, just, selling insurance, leading a small team in the insurance business. LexisNexis came calling, and I wanted to kind of move towards more of a B2B world as opposed to closer to a B2C, selling benefits and stuff like that. And so I went to LexisNexis and started talking to all these lawyers, and I was like, you know what, this is intellectually curious to me, and also an area where I could see myself kind of doubling down in a niche, if you will, for my career. So while working at LexisNexis, I went to law school at night here in Cleveland, and made law review, was able to take a 3-month leave of absence and go kind of, at least, not chase that dream, but just kind of see what it's like on that side of the desk. So I did a 3-month internship. It's called Summer Associate in the legal world. And frankly, ended up coming back over to this side, over to the technology sales side, because I think it matches up to my skill set best. And it just seemed to make sense for me career wise. And I don't regret it for one day, but I have kept my license up because I did go through all the hassle of getting the degree and passing the bar and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say, like, you do all that work. I used to work in the healthcare industry a lot, and occasionally we come across doctors that have very similar journey as yours, where they, went through all the pain and the time to get that, to achieve that, and then to not keep it up would just seem like a waste. But I think that's pretty cool you've done that.
Yeah, it's credentialing. I mean, I work with lawyers every day. I talk to lawyers every day, or my team now,
Yeah.
now that I've been in management for about 10 years, more or less. But we work with lawyers every day. And so having somebody that understands, rules of procedure and rules of evidence and how cases kind of move through the system, having that has certainly been helpful. I'm a big believer in a salesperson, whether they're the person knocking on doors or first level management, second level management. Huge believer in them bringing a ton of subject matter value to every conversation. I treat sales and sales leadership really as, or sales in particular, as being kind of like a short-term, narrowly focused consulting more than how can I get you into these, bucket seats kind of thing. So, when I talk to my salespeople, I kind of tell them how, or I kind of like teach how to kind of guide people through a process as if you're a consultant rather than push the people through a process like you're a salesperson. So you're bringing that expertise as a lawyer and then being able to kind of impart that to my team and, kind of have that, I belong in the room kind of sense is really
Mhm.
important.
So, what was your motivation to go from being a salesperson, carrying a quota and all that, to shift into a leadership role?
That's a really good question. I have been in both sales and leadership roles going all the way back to college. And I really enjoyed being in sales leadership, recruiting, managing, training, teaching, motivating, inspiring, all those kinds of things going all the way back to college. Chris, I don't know if you've ever run into anybody in your journey of talking to hundreds, if not thousands of sales leaders. But I was one of those guys that ran around in college selling books door to door, like in neighborhoods. Have you ever run into anybody that did that?
Um, I interviewed for a job selling knives, and then once I heard what it was, I didn't move forward with that because the whole thing was like, this is not a job selling, and we get in there and like, oh yes, it is.
Yeah, that would be Cutco, I think, or
Cutco, exactly.
marketing or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah,
that, I'd rather sell books than knives door to door, whether it's the 90s or the 2020s.
yeah,
There's something, and frankly, I probably wouldn't do it in this day and age. But back in the 90s, I put myself through college
yeah.
selling and then recruiting a team. And by the time I was done with college, I actually had an organization of over 40 people that were kind of organically under me in kind of that. I'm not going to call it multi-level, but you recruit people, and if some
Yep.
of those people do well, then they come back the next year and recruit people, and that's how I built that organization.
Yeah.
So I think I was probably cut out for some type of leadership, for my career. It took me, frankly, 10 years in legal tech. I've been in legal tech for about 20 years. It took me 10 years of carrying the bag. And then the right opportunity came along for me to move into kind of a regional sales director with a team of about 5 people. Then that grew into, promotion, if you will, to national director of business development, team of about the same number of people, but just spread out over the whole country and focused on a particular uh, customer profile, if you will. And then, from there, it's just been leading small to large. So, my largest teams I've led have been around 30 people with 3 managers and a layer of account executives as well. So, from anywhere from 3 to 30 people over the last 10 years, I've been leading, managing, recruiting, training, and all of it.
So I think a big part of being a successful sales leader is creating a culture that aligns with the core values of the company. What's your philosophy around how you go about building that culture within your sales team?
Well, every company has great core values. I'll read one of them. I keep on my screen here. One of them for our company is to go above and beyond. Save our clients in each, or sorry, serve our clients and each other with responsiveness, respect, and enthusiasm. That probably sounds like a core value uh, that there's something like that about being customer centric, for example. That would be a core value that probably anybody listening to this would have, similar core values
Mhm.
for their company. One of the core values that has really worked for me a lot in the over the years is to really focus on the internal sale. By internal sale, what I mean by that is whether you're a account executive, an individual contributor, first level manager, second level manager, if you can't make that sale internally to be able to either get the discount that you want or the special, way to package something up, if you're a rep, or to be able to advocate for a particular position or a go-to-market strategy, if you're a manager or a VP, if you can't make that sale internally with all the different stakeholders, that's going to be a problem because you're put on an island. Your sphere of influence is really minimized. And so I've worked very hard to build up rapport and positive culture with the people that I work with at both the peer level as well as, in any hierarchy, if you will. I'm not a particularly hierarchical person, but there's layers of management just like anywhere. And so if you build up good relationships vertically and horizontally, and the only way to do that is through mutual respect, honesty, just kind of being real, bringing your real self to work. Um, People can tell a fake a mile away, more and more so. So if you're not real, or if you're just kind of giving a line, or if you're kind of putting on airs or trying to, kind of pump like aggrandize yourself at the expense of the team or the company or the service that you're trying to provide internally and externally, people can see through that, and nobody's impressed by that kind of stuff.
Now, what role does vulnerability, not only for you, but amongst your team, play in building that culture?
Well, that's a good question. I think that um, when you say vulnerability, another way to just kind of put that is just realness.
Mhm.
Um, Look, I don't expect my reps or my peers to bring all of their gripes and all of what happened bad to them over the weekend to the office. I think that can go too far in a certain direction. At the same time, we've probably all been in meetings before where we feel like there was somebody in there that just kind of sucked all the energy out of the room or sucked all the air out of the room because it was just like everybody's on pins and needles, walking on eggshells. When's the next shoe gonna fall? This person is in here and they're here to kick butt and take names and just kind of show that they're boss and that they're tough and that kind of thing. That type of culture never motivated me as a rep. And I'm thankful that I carried the bag arguably for 10 years in legal tech, but even before that, whether it was in the insurance business, I was a player coach in the insurance business, and I was a player coach even going back to college in the book business, as a college student. So I'm a big believer in that player coach model, and that has really informed my approach to sales management. I guess you could say that I'm kind of a reps manager or a reps VP. I don't come from a top-down approach, but I come from an approach of what would I want if I was a rep to be able to be empowered to be able to succeed. And so that's what I try to bring to a team is that. Now, when you're in a meeting, then, what's a practical thing? A practical thing that I'll do at the beginning of all my sales meetings is have something that I call segue. You might have heard that used in this concept before. And yeah, it kind of comes from some business principles that get bandied around. But a segue is where we take ourselves from wherever we were, whether we were working on a spreadsheet, or just had an uncomfortable conversation with your partner, or an uncomfortable conversation with another colleague. It's where we just kind of clear our mind and get present in the moment for that meeting. And the best way to do that is not to just rip the needle off the record and go straight into, okay, let's talk about deals. Best way to do that is to give it 2 or 3 minutes on kind of what's going on in your life. And so over the course of a year of doing that every week in a sales meeting, you're going to learn that that person is a whole person, is a complete person, what they're into. Are they into fishing? Are they into golf? Whatever it is. Or is their kid looking at college? These are the kind of things that help you kind of keep that room more open and collaborative, and to use your word, vulnerable, I guess. Again, that's a word that maybe is a little bit more emotionally charged than I want it to be, because you don't want to, I have a big belief, you never dump down, you always dump up. So, like I would never go to one of my reps and be vulnerable in a way that's inappropriate,
Mhm.
that just is like, man, this guy's just a complainer, or he thinks the company that he works for stinks or something like
Right,
that. So,
right.
so that's not the type of vulnerability I think that is healthy for a company. At the same time, vulnerability around just being a whole person and bringing your best whole self to work is something that has worked for me and is super important.
What about, sharing stories of, failure, or, mistakes that you've made in the past, that type of vulnerability to say, hey, look, I've had deals where I've screwed up, and this is what I've learned from it. These were because it is all about like, hey, everybody falls down, everybody fails, but it's about what I learned from that experience, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think about some of the times that I've interviewed for new positions, and really what I've looked for in the people that I would be working with, both laterally and people that would be, upline for me, whether it be a CRO or a CEO, is just a sense of, I guess we do come back to that word vulnerability, because if a CEO or a CRO or a sales VP or whoever's one level upline from you can be vulnerable to their humanity,
Mhm.
that is massive. Because like I wouldn't, frankly, I wouldn't go work for a company if I could at all avoid it, where I felt like the person upline for me was in it for themselves,
Right.
or doesn't have kind of that, I guess, sense of ironic self-awareness
Mhm.
that I value and hopefully exhibit. Being able to say, you know what, it's kind of solidarity, right? We're all in this together. We all know work is work. We all know every day is not going to be perfect. We all know that there's systems and processes that suck. There's going to be deals that you thought you had that, fell apart at the last minute. And guess what? It's not always somebody's fault. Sometimes it just
Right.
happens. Sometimes it is somebody's fault. And so we inspect it and inquire. And none of this has anything to, none of this in any way excuses, again, bringing your best whole self to work.
That's right.
And for somebody like myself who's very demanding, there's a yin to that yang, if you will. Like I'm very demanding and have very high standards. And that would be a little bit much if I didn't also, I think, bring the vulnerability and the, oh, by the way, I suck sometimes too, kind of idea.
I agree. It's to me, it's hard to get your team to really buy into that. Hey, I've got your back. I'm here to help you. If you don't have that level, or at least some level of vulnerability, because they're going to think like this guy's full of it, or this woman's full of it. Like they're talking out both sides of their mouth. We're like, oh, I've got your back, but then I'm gonna step on you if I need to.
Right. And really what it comes down to when I look at it is, how do I inspire my team to their best performance? And so there's this is oversimplifying, and I don't mean to create a false dichotomy, but if I create two ways of doing it, and we've all been there before. Most people listening to this, and certainly you, Chris, and I have been in these trenches for decades, frankly. There's the person who leads by fear, and there's the person who leads by positivity. And now there's shades of that. It's not black and
Right.
white.
Yep.
But I've reported to enough people who lead by fear in my life to just know that that didn't really work for me, because when you're led by fear, what happens is that it kills creativity, it kills self-initiative, because you feel like every little thing you do, you're not sure if it's going to get slapped down, and so you aren't on your front foot and you lose your confidence. And confidence going into a sales call is absolutely massive. And knowing that you belong in that room, and knowing that you're bringing value, and knowing that you've got, people have your back behind you. And so that negativity, like management, or management by fear, management by like, again, I've put people on performance improvement plans. I've fired people. So it's not to say that it's all sweetness and light,
Right.
but I like to fire people, and I don't like to put people on performance improvement plans. And so managing by the threat of that is really negative. In my current business and in the last couple businesses that I've led, I've avoided the word quota. I use the word sales goal, and really it's the same thing, but I just think that there's kind of a negative connotation to the word quota. And so I've excised the word quota from the terminology and the sales playbooks that I put together. Just because, again, I want to create an environment and a culture of positivity and us all running through the wall together, as opposed to, ultra hierarchical command and control and management by fear.
Yeah. So that's the thing I think people may just or may not appreciate is that you can do everything you're talking about and still have accountability at the same level you would if you're fear-based. But it's a totally different environment. It's a totally different paradigm in terms of leadership because you're saying, I think what's really important is that you're giving people freedom to move and do what they think is right. You're not just locking them into this narrow path because there's no way you can't control everything. You have to trust otherwise, why do you have a team? You got to let them use their brains, right?
Right. I mean, I think the analogy would be to sports. I mean, somebody who knows that they is on the field, whether it's soccer or football or whatever, they know that they belong there. They know they can perform because they performed before. They know their coach has their back. That's the athlete who's going to be able to have the creativity
Yeah.
to hit that three-pointer from the arc or from what they call the logo. That's all the rage right now with Caitlin and all that stuff. But yeah, so the creativity that you have the ability to produce and the confidence you're able to have when you feel safe. And by the way, my wife works in what's called organizational development. She's got a master's in positive and organizational development. So you can imagine how fun our conversations are
Yeah.
at the dinner table. The kids kind of go off and play their video games or go do their homework. And we just keep talking about like, what's a positive work culture look like? And she led me to an article from the Harvard Business Review some years ago on psychological safety, which is a phrase I'd never heard before. It's not a phrase you hear much in sales, frankly.
No, I've never heard it before.
And the concept of psychological, and again, because it's in the Harvard Business Review, it must be true and real, right?
That's right.
But no, it's a great article. And the concept of it is really what I've been talking about without naming it. But the idea is that if you get your best whole self to work and know that people have your back, it doesn't it doesn't preclude a culture of high performance and accountability, because especially in sales, anybody listening to this knows that the numbers don't lie. But how do you get to those numbers? Do you get to those numbers through feeling like you're scared and afraid that you're going to lose your job? Or do you actually get to the numbers better by feeling good about your work, looking forward to coming to the work with a sense of positivity and collaboration with your team? And of course, you're trying to be the number one on the stack ranking, but being number one or number two in the stack ranking, when you care about your teammates and you can pop your hand up and ask questions and get help from your manager, get help from a colleague, everybody working together in that world. If you're in a sales kind of a like a team environment, or even if you're working remotely, just ping somebody on your messaging system to be able to get some help and not kind of be that lone wolf. So psychological safety in sales is something that I'm super, super interested in, because it's not a concept that gets talked about a lot. But I believe that you can have that, which sounds like a very soft factor, but you can have that in service of the hard factor, which is very high performance. And frankly, when I think about all the times that I've been happiest and most productive as a sales rep, back when I carried the bag, that was when I felt like my manager had my back. It felt like I knew what I was doing and that I kind of just had the wind at my back. And I was just flying along. And
Yeah.
that's all that psychological safety does, is it gives you that sense of we're in this together. People have my back. Um, I've been given the tools that I need to succeed. In other words, whether it be playbooks or one sheets or battle cards or whatever it is, and I've been trained properly to be able to add value to those conversations. That's the healthy recipe to repeatable sales success, outside of just getting lucky with like a product that's just flying off the shelves, or everybody having to be like the best salesperson since Tony Robbins or whatever. So
Yeah.
scaling it up and having multiple people be able to have successful times, you have to create that culture to enable that to happen.
Yeah. As you're talking, I was thinking of, I took parenting classes, I have two kids and parenting classes that a lot of people do. And one of my key takeaways, or I think is very parallel to what you're saying, is that you could be that parent who is completely free will and do whatever the heck you want, no boundaries, and the kids flounder. That typically they flounder because they don't know where to go, or they have absolutely no direction. Then you have the other extreme where their parent is trying to control absolutely everything that kid does, and you have a totally miserable child. And then you've got, what I learned was like, you just have to set very clear boundaries. Kids want boundaries. They don't want to know where the limits are. But beyond that, let them be kids. Let them
Yeah.
go out and explore and fail. Let them fall down. We don't have to wrap them in bubble wrap. They've got to learn through failure, right? And so that's a very simple analogy, but I think it applies to, like you got to set the direction, the goals, the limits, right? And then go out and have a good time. Go, learn, achieve, right?
Okay, so what I'm learning here is that I'm going to add to my many dating analogies that I use when I'm talking about sales.
Oh, I want to
And I'm
hear
going
this.
to, and I'm going to use and I'm going to use parenting analogies when I talk about sales culture and sales management. Okay. You can't tell me you've never thought about how similar sales is to dating. Okay.
No,
Okay.
it's, I tell you, that's hilarious. Yeah. I haven't really
I haven't
thought
dated
about
for
that.
many, many years. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but I have dated.
Yeah. No, it is. It's like you got to make sure you're a fit, especially when you're building a team. You've got to know what's going to fit, what kind of personalities and what kind of drive. So when you're recruiting a team, how do you leverage um, this paradigm you have around psychological safety as part of your recruitment strategy?
That's a really good question too. I think that I do fall back to some principles that I've learned in recruiting over the years, and this is something I'm sure you've heard before, but it bears repeating. I think is I go into any interview, and by the way, similar to this, it's just a freewheeling conversation. Obviously, I ask questions and I have goals, and I almost treat it like jazz. Like in jazz, you're in a key, but then you kind of riff within the key.
Yeah,
Uh, as opposed to being super structured like classical music. So my interviews and frankly, a lot of sales calls are like that, have been like that as well, where I know what I'm trying to get to and I know the basic structure, whether you're using spin selling or solution selling or challenger or whatever. I've learned all those backwards and forwards.
yeah,
You know kind of the structure of a call. But if you know it so well, then you can kind of riff on it within the structure. But interviewing is the same way. So with interviewing, I know that I want to get in that all I need to learn, and it might be different questions that just kind of pop up that get me there. Do they get it? Do they want it? And I even add, do they need it? And do they have the capacity to do it? Uh,
interesting.
get it, want it, capacity. And I've read my share of business books. That comes from a business book called Traction, which a lot of people
Oh
have
yeah,
probably heard of.
yeah,
My last company lived Traction, like lived and breathed it,
yeah.
and we had a lot of success with it. And so, even though my current company doesn't use it specifically, amongst my leadership team, I've kind of brought some of those principles in and kind of taught some of that stuff to others as they start interviewing. But do they get it? In other words, do they understand their role? Do they understand their place? Will they relatively quickly be able to acclimate themselves into this role and be able to learn the subject matter to be able to then be that subject matter expert to be able to do it. So, for example, I'm not a big high finance guy. It would take me a long time to be able to really, really sell complex banking instruments and banking as a service and all that kind of stuff. I think like a lawyer. So law stuff is more natural to me. And there's a difference between those two. I'm not a numbers guy, I'm more of an
Right.
ideas guy.
Yep.
Do they want it or even need it? I've made mistakes in the past where I've really, including fairly recently, where I only went with the want it, and I didn't really go to need it. And what's need it mean? Need it doesn't necessarily mean that if they don't get this job, they're going to be destitute. But need it means, oftentimes in sales, it means, are they hungry for something, income or advancement or something that will motivate them and cause them to go the extra mile. And it usually in sales, frankly, it often is financial goals. It could be
Yep.
short-term, mid-term, or long-term financial goals, but that need it needs to be there as a, or want it, need it, however you want to phrase it, has to be there as a career thing that is like, you know what? I cannot fail and I will not quit for these reasons. And so a hire that I've done fairly recently, I think that person wanted it somewhat, but I maybe overemphasized how much they wanted it and ended up finding out that the person really didn't need it,
Hmm.
and would leave it at that. And then capacity is kind of similar to get it, but capacity means, do they? I do sometimes kind of mistake, the difference between get it and capacity to do it. They're similar enough, but they're another way to look at, you know, do they have what it takes to be able to succeed? Those are
Yeah.
the things that I look for in an interview.
Yeah. That's interesting. Let's shift the conversation just a bit here. CRM, do you love it or do you hate it?
Do I get it? Do I want it? Do I have capacity to use it?
Yeah, we're going to talk
Again,
about that.
look,
I'm totally going to tie that in.
I've been using CRM like most people have, basically my whole career.
Yep.
Of course, it's important. There's good rollouts and there's bad rollouts. And bad rollouts don't have to stay bad rollouts. They can be fixed.
Yep.
And sometimes for a lot of money. If you set the bone wrong the first time, you sometimes have to re-break the bone and then reset it. So there's
Yeah.
an analogy for you. But no, I mean, CRM, I know you talk a lot about CRM in all aspects of your life. You've heard the phrase single source of truth. I mean, if you can get your finance data, your customer data, your, sales data about like how many units of this or that or the other, if you can get that all in there and then be able to do some even simple reporting and have those reports be standardized and scheduled week by week, you're ahead of probably 70% of the world. I've been there. I know what good CRM looks like, and good, frankly, revenue ops or sales ops that helps get it to that place. I've also been places where the data is, shall we say, more elusive. So, I'm a big believer in that. No, I look at CRM from the perspective of a manager. If I'm a user of CRM day to day in my deals, yeah, I get the muscle memory I need to be able to find out what to click when and what I'm supposed to do. And so we roll out specific kind of practices or rules on how to populate the right fields in the CRM to make sure that we have what we need to be able to kick some reports out. That's a basic outline. Now, I would like to be able to, and I'm sure there's tools out there to do it. I'm not going to say my current company is to the place where we're at this level of sophistication, but I would like to be able to not just use CRM data to report on the past, but you start getting into like BI and analytics to be able to kind of have those past insights, be able to predict the future or predict, an A or a B or a C type of, if we do this, this is what the outcome is, and we kind of believe that that's what it's going to be. If we
Yep.
try B, we'll get these kinds of outcomes. That's the next level stuff. I hope to get there with my current company in the next year or two. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when you look at your current CRM implementation, if you had a magic wand that you could wave to fix one thing and make it better, what would it be?
currently we have, and without using any names, currently we have a bit of a disconnect between what you might call like MarTech and sales tech.
Oh, good.
So again, I'm not going to use any brand names, but we've got some things that we use to
Yep.
help us get marketing emails out.
Yep.
And like a lot of companies our size, we're not tiny, we're not a startup, but we're also not Oracle. We're somewhere in between. We're about 450 people. But we
Yep.
have multiple instances of CRM, even with that 450 people, because we've got these discrete business units that really do run pretty independently.
Yep.
So we've got a instance of our CRM for the business that I help lead. And even in that third of the company that I help lead, we have 5 products where there should probably be 2. And a lot
Yep.
of that comes from the fact that we use third parties. A lot of companies our size and smaller use third parties for scalability on on marketing operations or on, helping get things out the door because we run lean.
Yeah.
Companies our size tend to run lean in marketing. So you
Yeah.
don't have 10 people that are content marketers and copywriters and all that kind of stuff. We're very lean. And so we rely on quick scale up and scale down using third-party agencies. Well, again, without using names, one of our third-party agencies wanted to use product X. And so they're using product X kind of off in a silo and
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how to get that data into our CRM
Yeah.
through product Y, which is our standard MarTech
Yeah.
product. So you asked the question, it's kind of an ugly answer, but it's kind of
Yeah.
the hairball scenario all over again that we're working on.
It
So
probably surprised people when you gave your answer. I said, "Oh, good." The reason I said, "Oh, good," is that's a real meaty topic that a lot of companies are struggling with. It's very common. I see
I
that
would
so
think so.
much,
Yeah, I would think
and
so.
it happens exactly how you described. It's like, hey, we're starting out, we're growing. This is the budget that we have available. What can we get to do the job?
Yeah,
And while it may work for a little while, eventually it's going to hit a wall. And how do I deal with that? And I think one thing that people have to understand is like anything else, um, your technology infrastructure for sales and marketing has to grow with the firm. And
hmm
so I get asked a lot, like, "Hey, Chris, what's the right CRM for our business?" And basically, what I tell them is don't buy a CRM for the way your business is now. Buy it for where you want your business to be 3 to 5 years from now,
for sure.
which is
Yeah,
hard to envision. But you've got strategic goals. You've got a plan where you want to be in 3 years or 5 years. That's what you need to be buying for because that platform should, if it's done right, if it's implemented correctly, it will help you get there.
right.
And so when you get there, you obviously want a platform that's going to continue to support, the next set of strategic goals and where that stake is going to move. Nobody's stopping, right? We're all trying to grow all the time.
Right.
And so that's when you get into that position where now, hey, we've got all these silos. It gets expensive. It gets hard.
Yeah.
Um, and there's no easy answer to that, but it's something that, like anything else, you have to have a strategy for it. That then it has to align with the business.
Right. And I guess the only thing I would really add to that too is that it's necessary. We talk about single source of truth, but at the same time, it is necessary to have tools that play nicely with others.
Yeah.
Well, um, of the capabilities to bring like ABM technology into CRM to be able
Yeah.
to be a smart overlay so that you kind of know who to go after based on some ABM, whether it's internal IP addresses or cookies or whatever, to be able to kind of determine who's closer to market, who passes like a warmth score, even if they're not raising their hand. That's a
Yeah.
constant thing in our world, is how do you get to the people with the right messaging at the right time if they're not raising their hand? Because if they raise their hand, it's easy to score that a certain way on X system, to be able
Yeah.
to score it, to say, okay, that's going to be a lead or an MQL or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the fact that the data is out there.
Yeah.
um, and in my business, I go again, we're back to the bankruptcy business. We kind of know who all the bankruptcy lawyers are. Like,
Mhm.
we don't need to go buy lists or something like
Yeah.
that. Like, there's a lot of list sellers
It's a
out there.
defined universe. Yeah.
Right. We know who our bankruptcy lawyers are, and we're the biggest player in that space. And so we have 10,000 of the 14,000 on our platform in some way, shape, or form. There's maybe 15,000 people that matter to us, and we know basically who those 15,000 people are.
Yeah.
Well, what if we could use the email addresses that we have, and this is kind of lower level ABM, but be able to kind of say, okay, follow them around the internet and get them ads on YouTube. I'm
Yeah.
kind of getting into like more marketing side stuff, which is something that I've grown into, frankly. You'll find that sales leaders, as they advance in their career, they realize that it's all one big revenue puzzle.
Yeah. It really is. And
And
it's,
that's not new news to you, I'm sure, to
yeah.
anybody on here,
Yeah,
but
my previous episode for Sales Lead Dog, we were talking about that unification between sales and marketing, that they can't be separate entities anymore where you're just throwing
yeah,
stuff back and forth across the wall. They
right.
have to work as a unified team to be effective these days. It's too complicated. It's too hard. The competition level just gets higher and higher every year. And
Right. And
you
I would
need to
I
be
would
able to
say,
react quickly.
yeah, and I would say that in businesses that are focused on mass outreach to lots of entities for smaller transactions, which is our business, is even more so than the enterprise whale chasing entities. Now, don't get me wrong, marketing is just as important, but in a different way for the organization. And I've worked for both types. Currently, I'm in a position where it's really kind of a mass marketing operation with targeted smart sales effort at the highest value interactions. This is not a playbook that I'm so unique to make, but if you're going to use human resource towards the sales problem, you're going to put that human resource towards the highest value opportunity, because that's not as scalable as getting digital and email marketing right. So
coming back to the MarTech discussion, you need a platform. I talk about unifying sales and marketing. Your technology should be unified as well. That doesn't mean it necessarily has to be the same platform. That would be the ideal solution, and there are vendors out there that have those capabilities. But if you don't have that platform, then you better have a really good integration strategy so that they act unified. I think that's the key. And I am not the CRO. I'm the VP of sales. And so I work closely with our marketing people. And, I kind of own sales, a part of it on the sales side. And then marketing kind of owns another part of it that is kind of that automation stuff. Of course, the automation stuff goes into the CRM. And so the issues that we sometimes run into are that we aren't able to sometimes get the data to sometimes even match up. Sometimes the data will come across, and so again, our instance of our CRM is not anywhere close to where it needs to be, but we're working on that right now to get it cleaned up, kind of like that broken bone concept. But being able to, if we say, give me all lawyers who have bought this many units of this between this period and this period, like that's pretty X's and O's. That's pretty black and white. And if one system gives you one number and another system gives you something radically different, that's the kind of stuff that, frankly, you got a problem.
You got to agree on a number. Otherwise, frankly, and the last thing that you want, maybe this is a message for other sales leaders, is you better get along with your marketing leaders and you better agree on numbers, because relationships and teams go down when you aren't on the same page and when you don't agree on numbers.
I think we're going to end this episode of Sales Lead Dog right there. There's a good spot to end it. Jason, really appreciate you coming on the show. If people want to reach out, connect with you, if they want to learn more about Stretto, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm linkedin.com/in/Jason D. Grimes. So I was able to personalize that. So
that's an easy one to find then.
That's my LinkedIn. That's easy to find. Feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. I will say that I'm a big believer in knowing the people that I connect with. I've got over 1,900 connections. I've met every single one of those people.
No kidding.
Sometimes it's on a Zoom, but I'm not an open networker. But if you reach out to me, maybe we have a networking call. And I've had so many meaningful networking calls with people in our industry and others through that type of interaction. So I would value a 5 or 10 minute call, and then we can get connected and see how we can help each other.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So if you didn't catch that URL, that's okay. Get it in our show notes. You can get the show notes at impellercrm.com/sales lead dog, where you'll find not only this episode, but all the 100+ episodes of Sales Lead Dog. Be sure to check that out. Be sure to subscribe so you get all our future episodes. Jason, thanks again for coming on Sales Lead Dog, and welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Pack.
I love it. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
As we end this discussion on Sales Lead Dog, be sure to subscribe to catch all our episodes. On social media, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Watch the videos on YouTube, and you can also find our episodes on our website at impellercrm.com/Sales Lead Dog. Sales Lead Dog is supported by Impeller CRM, delivering objectively better CRM for business, guaranteed.